Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. Chapter 1. The Sin of Hester Prynne. In the 17th century, there was a small town called Boston. In Boston Square, there was a tiny dark prison. On a shiny summer morning, a lot of people waited in front of the prison door. They were very angry. They were all ready to attack. "Hester Prynne is not a good woman," shouted a young and ugly woman. "You're right, and they have to punish her," answered a man with a hat on his head. "Kill her. It is a suitable punishment," another man said. "Don't talk. They are opening the door," someone said. On that summer morning when our story begins, people were silent. Suddenly, two men opened the door. A short man with black clothes walked toward the people. A young, beautiful woman followed the man. She was tall and she had big eyes. Her hair was long and it shone in the sun. She was carrying a baby in her arms and a big red letter A on her cloth. This letter appeared in the fine red cloth which was surrounded with an elaborate embroidery. "This is not a suitable punishment for an adulteress," a woman said angrily. "The governor is very pitying. Why don't they kill her?" a man asked. "This woman can hide this letter with a brooch or with another adornment. Then she can walk bravely on the streets," said another woman. "Ah, but," answered a young wife, holding a child in her arms, and said softly, "she can hide this letter with a brooch, but she can't hide the shame in her heart. It will always be there." Then a short man said loudly, "Make way, good people! Make way in the king's name! This woman will stand for 4 hours in the town square. This is her punishment," he said, and turned to Hester. "Follow me, Hester. You will show your scarlet letter to everybody." The people surrounded her and started to shout angrily against her. They were all religious people, and they thought that Hester had an awful character. They were ready to gossip. They were laughing and shouting loudly. Hester followed the short man. She stood on the high stage with her baby. The people looked at her angrily. Hester stood there with her baby, but there was no husband. She held the baby closely to her bosom. Soon all the people began to shout at her. Hester felt sad, but there were a haughty smile and a glance that would not be erased from her face. Suddenly she became red in the face with anger. Hester Prynne, with her beautiful face and shining hair, looked even more beautiful on the high stage. The people who were angry with her also admired her beauty. She was looking around at her townspeople and neighbors with her big black eyes. She remembered her old days in Old England. In her memories she had a mother and a father. There was also a tall man with an old face. He was her husband. He had taken her to Amsterdam. Then he had decided to live in New England. Then again he changed his mind and sent Hester before him to wait for him in a small town called Boston. 2 years passed, but he never came. Now she was standing on the stage with her baby, and there was a scarlet letter on her chest. This letter showed that she was a sinner. To be the wearer of the scarlet letter was embarrassing for her. She took hold of her baby tightly with anger, and the baby began to cry. She turned her eyes at the scarlet letter and touched it with her finger. She couldn't believe for a while that the baby and the shame were real. But yes, these were her realities. She was so lonely and miserable. She had to bear being the object of severe observation. All of her early memories were vanishing now. Only there was the reality of a continental city with all of these rude townspeople. While looking at the crowd, Hester saw a figure, and she was surprised. This was an Indian man in his native cloth standing there. There was also a white man standing next to the Indian. He was so tall that Hester could see his familiar face easily in the crowd. For the townspeople, he was a stranger in town, but that morning nobody was interested in him. They had a woman wearing a scarlet letter who was accused of adultery. At his arrival in the marketplace, before she saw him, the stranger had looked to Hester Prynne. It was a careless look. Very soon, his look became attentive and filled with horror. He was not calm anymore. When his eyes met with Hester's eyes, he saw that Hester recognized him. Then, touching the shoulder of a townsman, "I pray you, good sir," said he, "who is this woman, and why is she standing there in shame?" "You must be a stranger in this town, friend," answered the townsman. He looked curiously to the stranger and continued, "You haven't heard of Hester Prynne and her evil doings? She raised a great scandal in this town." "You are right. I'm a stranger and have been traveling for a long time with this Indian friend of mine," said the stranger. "Will you please tell me the story of Hester Prynne?" The townsman began to tell her the story to the stranger. She was the wife of an honored Englishman. Her husband first decided to live in Amsterdam, but then he changed his plans. He sent his wife before him and told her to wait here. He would come here too. But in 2 years he hasn't returned. So what happened then? Now his young wife is holding a baby in her arms, but nobody knows who the father is. The baby must be 3 or 4 months old. "Ah, I understand," said the stranger, with a bitter smile. "Madam Hester doesn't want to say the father's name. God knows who he is." "Now, good sir," said the stranger, "she has to wear that scarlet letter and remember her sin. But the other sinner must be known. But he will be known. He will be known." After a long while, suddenly an old man spoke from above. "Listen to me, Hester Prynne." He was John Wilson, the old minister in the church. He said, "Hester, now your minister will talk to you. Listen to him." The townspeople and Hester looked at the young man. He was Arthur Dimmesdale, a very young minister. He was very handsome, too. He had large, brown and melancholy eyes. Mr. Dimmesdale had come from one of the great English universities. He had brought all the learning of the age into this wild forest land. Hester thought that the minister would take his baby away from her, so she held her baby tightly to her bosom and looked at the young minister. The young minister first looked at Hester with sad eyes, then he started his speech. "Hester Prynne," he said, "who is the father of your baby? You have to tell us and God will help you. Tell us, who is the other sinner?" Dimmesdale's voice was sweet, rich, and deep. Even the poor baby at Hester's chest was affected by his voice and turned its eyes toward him. Hester with scary eyes answered, "I will not tell." "Hester!" shouted John Wilson. "The good and young minister is right. You have to tell us the name. We will pity you. Maybe we will take that letter out from your chest." "Never!" shouted Hester. She turned to Arthur Dimmesdale and looked into his eyes. "Maybe you can take the scarlet letter out from my chest, but it is also in my heart. You cannot take it out." She held the child so fiercely to her breast that the little baby started to cry. Then Hester turned her eyes down at the scarlet letter. It had a golden color, but the shame of it hurt her heart deeply. She had to bear this cruel reality. "Speak!" a man shouted. "Speak and give your child a father." Hester remembered this voice. She looked at the people. Then she saw a face. It was an old face. It was that familiar face, but she didn't say anything. She only answered the shouting man. "My baby does not have a father in this world. She has her father in heaven," she said. Hester stood for 4 hours on the stage and did not say the name of the other sinner. After a while, the short man in black clothes took her with the baby to prison again. She was looking at the crowd and thinking about how cruel they were. She passed through the iron gate, thinking only about that familiar face. The townspeople were talking among themselves. They were telling Hester's story to a stranger, and they were wondering who the baby's father was. Everybody thought that the father should be among the townspeople now, but it was certain that the father was not the husband of Hester Prynne. Chapter 2. The Interview with Chillingworth. After they took Hester and her little baby to prison again, soon they started to cry with pain, and they felt themselves sick. Then the workmen in the prison called a doctor. He was a physician who was using the old methods like medicinal herbs and roots that grew in the forest. Although they needed much professional assistance, especially for the baby, they were introduced to this mysterious doctor. The doctor was Roger Chillingsworth. When Hester saw the doctor, she knew him. He was the man with the old face. "Please leave me alone with my patient," the doctor told the jailer. "Trust me, I'll look after Mistress Prynne. I promise you that I won't let her escape, good jailer." The prison worker left the doctor alone with Hester and her baby. First, the doctor gave the baby a special drink. A few minutes later, the baby stopped crying and slept. Then he prepared another drink for Hester. Hester did not want to drink because she was afraid of the old doctor, but she drank and felt good. The doctor and Hester began to talk. "You sent me here," Hester said, "but you did not come. Why?" "I stayed in another city. There were big mountains and forests. I lived with wild people. I learned many secret recipes from them, but now I am here," he answered. "You stayed alone in Boston, and that was wrong, I know. You are very beautiful and young, Hester. I am ugly and old. Why did I marry you?" "I never loved you, and I did not want to marry you," Hester said. "I know," the old man said, "but I loved you very much. I always dreamt of you." "I made you upset." Hester couldn't look into the eyes of the old man. "I'm sorry." "I made you upset first when I married you," Roger Chillingworth said. "You did a wrong thing. We all make mistakes, Hester. Please tell me the other sinner. Who is the father of this child?" he asked. "I will never tell you. Do not ask me," Hester answered. "Then do not tell me the father of the child. I will find him myself. When I find him, he will be mine. I will see him tremble." Hester was afraid of Roger Chillingworth's words. The old man's eyes were shining with a mysterious light. "Don't worry. I will not tell other people that he is the father of your child," he said. "But I want one thing from you." "What's that?" Hester asked. "No one knows me in town. They think that I am just a doctor. My purpose is to live and die unknown. Please don't say that I am your husband," he said. "Why do you want it?" asked Hester. "They will not punish you. You did nothing wrong." Roger Chillingworth did not answer Hester's question. He only said, "Promise that you will not tell my secret, and I will not tell yours." "I promise," Hester said. "Well," said the old man, "now I leave you with your baby and the letter A in your chest." Then he left the prison with a bad smile on his face. Chapter 3. Hester and Naughty Pearl. After a short time, Hester got out of prison. She was free. She moved into a small house. The house was not in town. No one wanted to be her friend. She was without a friend on earth. "When I die, they will put this scarlet letter on my grave. It will be my only monument and show my sin," thought Hester. She was sad but had a lot of work to do. First, she prepared beautiful clothes for her daughter. People liked these clothes and wanted Hester to make beautiful dresses for themselves. She was very talented in the art of needlework, so she started to earn money in a short time. She spent some of her money for food, but she helped poor people with the rest of her money. It was like a new start to life for Hester, but she had to bear more cruel words about her sin. Most people did not behave very well to Hester Prynne when they saw her in the street. They did not look and talk to her. They changed their ways for not to see her. They even said bad words to her. Children followed her in town and shouted bad things at her. Church ministers looked at her with cold feelings and said that she was a sinner. "God will punish you," they said. The scarlet letter was on her chest, and it shone with the fire from hell. Hester was very sad when they did bad things to her. Sometimes she touched her scarlet letter and cried. But she didn't say anything. She walked away directly to her house with tears in her eyes. The years passed fast, and every day the same things happened when Hester went in town. Hester's daughter's name was Pearl. Pearl was a very naughty child. She often did not listen to her mother's words. But Hester was not angry with Pearl. She thought, "I was not free. Now she is free, and she can do everything." She was her mother's only treasure and was so innocent. With strange rapidity, Pearl arrived at an age of social intercourse. Pearl had no friends in town, but she was happy with her mother. She always stood near her mother when they went out. Sometimes other children followed and said bad things to them. Pearl was angry with them. She ran after the children and shouted at them. Then she turned back to her mother and held her hand. According to Pearl, other children were boring. They were always playing games about churches. But for the townspeople, Pearl was a product of sin, and she had no right among the other children. The little girl didn't mind people's behavior, and she continued to feel happy holding her mother's hand. Hester had a wild and desperate character before Pearl, but now she was feeling happier and more optimistic about life. There were difficulties of being the lonely mother of this one child, but she didn't want Pearl to repeat her own mistakes, so she raised her well. Pearl was a cute child, but very naughty. One day Pearl collected some flowers. She threw the flowers at the scarlet letter on her mother's chest. Hester felt sad and looked at her naughty child, but Pearl was laughing. She was not an ordinary child. She had wild, bright, and deeply black eyes like her mother. But Pearl's laugh, though full of merriment and music, made her mother more doubtful than before. "Child, what are you?" Hester asked. "I am your little Pearl," she answered. "Are you really my little Pearl?" Hester asked. Pearl jumped up and down and laughed. "Yes, I am your child." Pearl was so naughty that Hester thought she might be to fly up the chimney. Hester said, smiling, "No, you are not my little Pearl. Tell me, what are you? Who sent you to me?" Little Pearl stopped jumping up and down. She looked at her mother. "I do not know," she said, seriously, coming up to Hester. "You tell me." "Your Father in heaven sent you," Hester answered. Pearl noted the hesitation in her mother's voice, and she did not believe in what Hester said. She only touched her mother's scarlet letter. "He did not send me. I have no Father in heaven," she said. Hester tried to persuade little Pearl to believe this, but naughty Pearl was more intelligent than her age. She laughed loudly. Then she started to jump up and down again. According to Hester, her child's behaviors were weird, and she often said to Pearl, "You elfish child," when she was angry with her, thinking that she had some spiritual specialties. Chapter 4. Hester in Governor's House. Hester was very sad, because the people in town wanted to take her child from her. In their eyes, Hester was not a good mother. She was a sinner. They thought that a woman who was a sinner couldn't raise a well-educated child. She could teach her devilish things. So Hester visited Governor Bellingham's house with Pearl. They approached the door, which was of an arched form, and there was a narrow tower. Lifting the iron hammer that hung at the portal, Hester Prynne knocked on the big door. The servants of the governor opened the door and welcomed the young woman and her daughter. Pearl was pleased with the gleaming decoration of the great house, and she was ready to dance and jump up as usual. But her mother made her stop. Pearl pointed upward at a picture, smiling at her mother with the elfish intelligence. The house seemed like Aladdin's palace to Pearl. It was decorated with strange figures and diagrams, so the little girl couldn't help herself dancing and jumping with happiness. Governor Bellingham was a very important and powerful man. She saw 3 other men in Governor's house: John Wilson, Arthur Dimmesdale, and Roger Chillingworth. "Please do not leave me alone. Don't take little Pearl from me," Hester cried. "We have to take her. You cannot teach her good things about God, because you have a scarlet letter on your chest," the governor said. "Yes, I am sinful," Hester said, "but I learned a lot of lessons from my scarlet letter. These lessons helped me. Now I can teach my little daughter good lessons." Hester spoke. The governor wanted John Wilson to ask a question to Pearl. John Wilson looked at Pearl and called her. "Come here." Pearl did not go next to him. "I will ask you a question. Who made you? Do you know the answer?" John Wilson asked. Pearl looked away and thought. Then she gave the answer. "Nobody made me. My mother found me in the wild roses near the prison door," she said. Pearl was like a red bird ready to fly, standing by the window in her red dress. Governor Bellingham was very angry with Pearl's answer. "Do you see?" he asked. "She does not know anything about God. You did not teach," he shouted. Hester cried, "No, you cannot take my little Pearl from me. God gave her to me. I love her very much. I cannot live without her," she said, and turned to Arthur Dimmesdale. "Please say something. You are my minister and you know me. I want to live with my daughter," Hester said. "God gave this child to the woman. She can teach her good things about God. I know this. Hester can show her heaven's way. They can live there happily. Maybe she is sinful, but she is a good mother. It's better for Pearl to stay with her mother." The governor liked Arthur Dimmesdale's words. "We will not take the child," he said. "She will go to school when she grows up." Then Pearl walked towards Arthur Dimmesdale. She held his hand to her face. She tenderly laid her cheek against it. It was very strange. There was love in Pearl's heart. Hester felt it. "Is that my Pearl?" asked Hester to herself. Suddenly Pearl laughed and walked away. Hester went with her. "She's a very different child," Roger Chillingworth said. "She looks like her mother, and I will find her father. I know it." "No," said John Wilson. "Only God can find this secret." After this conversation, the governor understood that this child of her father's guilt and her mother's shame had come from the hand of God. She hadn't done anything bad, so she would be a good educated girl in good hands. They had to give a chance to Hester as a mother. Chapter 5. The Secret of Dimmesdale. The young minister, Arthur Dimmesdale, was very sick. He had a white face. He was very tired, but people were happy for him, because he had a friend called Roger Chillingworth, the old doctor. The two men lived in the same house. The doctor can make him well, people thought. The people thought that the reason of the paleness of the young minister's face was his devotion to study and not eating sufficiently. One day, Dimmesdale was in the old doctor's room and saw him preparing a mixture of wild plants. "What are those plants for, doctor?" he asked kindly. "They are new to me. I found them growing on a grave. Some men are buried with their secrets. These ugly black weeds will help people in confessing their secrets," answered the old doctor. "That's good, sir, but I think it's a fantasy of yours," said the minister. Before Roger Chillingworth could answer, they heard the clear, wild laughter of a young child's voice. Dimmesdale was sitting near the window. He looked from the open window and saw Pearl with her mother. She was playing in the garden. She was very beautiful. Chillingworth stopped working and went to the window. "This child is very naughty. Do you think she is the child of God or the devil?" asked the old doctor. The young minister answered, "I don't know." Then Pearl saw two men and threw a flower at them. She laughed and ran. "Come, mother, or this old man will catch you, but he can't catch me," she said. So she drew her mother away, dancing and clapping her hands constantly. Chillingworth turned back to his table. He talked to Dimmesdale. "I am very sorry for you. You are very sick. Sometimes I think I can help you, but then I cannot understand anything. Can I ask you something?" "Yes." "Do you have any secrets?" "Why do you ask?" "Sometimes people are sick, because there are secrets in their hearts," Chillingworth answered. He looked into Dimmesdale's eyes carefully and asked again, "Tell me, do you have any secrets in your heart?" Dimmesdale got angry and shouted, "You are not a doctor of heart." "I cannot help you when you do not tell your secrets," Chillingworth said. "You cannot stand between God and me. God can help me, not you," he said, and left the room. The mysterious old Roger Chillingworth had become the medical adviser of Mr. Dimmesdale. Not only the disease interested the physician, but also he was curious to learn more about the character and qualities of his patient. So he spent much of his time with the young ill man, but he had evil looks in his eyes. The old doctor had tried to give him medicine, but Mr. Dimmesdale had refused to take them, although he had pain in his whole body. He didn't accept to talk about his secrets either. After he got angry and went away, Chillingworth smiled mysteriously. "His heart is burning with the fire from hell. I will learn your secrets, Mr. Dimmesdale," he said to himself. Then Arthur Dimmesdale felt very sorry for the things he said to his friend. So he said to Chillingworth, "I am very sorry. Please forgive me. You just wanted to help me, but I shouted at you. I need your help. I do not want to be sick." "Do not be afraid. I will help you," he said, with that cold smile on his face. On a hot day, Arthur Dimmesdale slept in his chair. Chillingworth came to his room and saw him. He walked towards the young minister. Chillingworth placed his hand on Dimmesdale's heart, under his shirt. He didn't move for a minute, and he took his hand back. He thought, "You have a secret in your heart, I know. It is as hot as fire in hell. Now, Mr. Dimmesdale, it is not your secret. I have your secret. Your life is in my hands." Chapter 6. Arthur Dimmesdale on the stage. Arthur Dimmesdale was a very successful minister. Everybody loved him. People went to his church every Sunday, but they were also sorry for him, because he was very sick. He will die of his sickness. People were afraid. In church, Dimmesdale spoke to the people. He wanted to tell everybody his secret. He said, "I am a very bad man. I am sinful. I did very bad things." But nobody believed him. "He's a very good man," everybody thought. "He cannot be sinful." Mr. Wilson was there too. He said, For one instant I believed that these words had passed his lips, but I think he has a big world of imagination. After his speech, people loved him more than the past. Arthur Dimmesdale tried to feel better, but he could not. He always talked to God. Please, my God, help me. I know I am a sinful man. What am I going to do? He punished himself. He did not eat anything. He did not sleep. Then he had another idea. He wore his good clothes and went out. He arrived in the town square. There was nobody, because it was night and everybody slept. He walked up the stairs. He was on stage. He remembered Hester. She had stood on this stage in daytime with her baby in her arms. I will stand here all night. People will see me on this stage tomorrow. He waited on the stage for a few hours. The weather was cold. He felt tired because he was sick. Suddenly he shouted, "Everybody will wake up and see me on this stage. Then they will understand the secret in my heart. I am not a good man. They will know this," he thought. Nobody came and saw him. People were in their beds. He stood on the stage for a short time and saw a light. The light was in the street. He looked at the street. There was a man. He was John Wilson, the old minister. John Wilson did not see Arthur Dimmesdale, but Dimmesdale saw him. The old minister walked away. Dimmesdale thought, "I will wait here. In the morning people will come here. They will look at the stage and see me. They will be angry with me. People will shout at me. I'm a bad man." The young minister laughed quietly when he thought about these things. Then he heard another laugh. It was a child's laugh. She was Pearl. "Pearl, little Pearl," cried he, after a moment's pause. "Hester, are you there?" he asked. Hester was below the stage. She looked at the young minister. "Yes, it is Hester Prynne," she replied. "It's me and my little Pearl." "What are you doing here at night?" asked the minister. "I was in Governor Winthrop's house. He died. I made burying clothes for him. Now I am turning back home. Hester, take little Pearl and come here. You and Pearl stood on this stage 7 years before, but I was not with you. Now I want to stand on this stage with you," he said. Hester held Pearl's hand. They walked up to the stairs and stood near the young minister. The minister took Pearl's hand. They all stood. There was a nice feeling in his heart. Pearl smiled at him and said, "Minister?" "Yes, my child." Dimmesdale smiled too. "Will you stand here with me and my mother tomorrow in the daylight?" "I cannot stand with you and your mother tomorrow. I can do it another day." Pearl did not like the minister's answer, and she wanted to take her hand back, but the minister held her hand strongly. "Please, Pearl, stand here with me," he said. "Promise me," Pearl repeated. "Will you hold my hand and my mother's hand tomorrow?" "I will do it, but not tomorrow." "When?" "One day I will hold your hand and your mother's hand near God, but the people of this world cannot see it." Pearl laughed in a strange way. Suddenly there was a bright light in the sky. It was a red light covered everywhere. They thought that this was a meteoric appearance. This was a natural phenomenon that occurred with less regularity than the rise and the set of the sun and the moon. Pearl had that naughty smile on her face with her usual elfish expression. Then the little girl took her hand from the minister's hand, and she showed a place. The minister looked at that place. Roger Chillingworth was standing there. The strange red light covered his face. The old doctor was very ugly, and his face was now uglier with hate. He had no love in his heart. "I don't like him, Hester. He's not a good man. I hate him. Do you know him?" Dimmesdale said. Hester wanted to say, "Yes, I know him," but she remembered the promise to Roger Chillingworth. She did not say anything. The minister asked again, "Don't you know him? Help me, Hester. I am afraid of this old man." "I know that man, minister. I can tell you," said Pearl. Then she said something quietly to the minister's ear, but the minister did not understand anything, because Pearl talked in a child language. She laughed. "Why did you do that?" he asked. "It's not funny." "Because you didn't promise. You will not stand with us on the stage tomorrow. You will not hold our hands," she answered. Roger Chillingworth called him. "Mr. Dimmesdale, is that you?" He came near the minister. He advanced to the foot of the platform. "You worked too much, and you walked in your sleep. I will take you home," he said. "Where did you come from? How did you know I was here?" the minister asked. "I was in Governor Winthrop's house. He died. I did my last duty for him. I prayed for him. And then, when I was on the way home, a bright red light shone in the sky. I saw you on the stage, he said. Mr. Dimmesdale was half frozen to death and was standing on the stage with shame. Follow me. Do not stay here or you will be very sick. You cannot feel good. You will sleep now in your bed and you will be healthy, said the old doctor. Arthur Dimmesdale could not say anything to Hester and little Pearl. He bent his head down and followed his doctor. The doctor said, Do you see now how these books trouble the brain, sir? You should study less and rest for a couple of days, or you'll be worse physically and mentally. The young minister couldn't find anything to say to his doctor, so they returned home together. The next day, Arthur Dimmesdale spoke in church. Everyone liked his words. After he finished his words, people wanted to talk to him. A gray-bearded man met him, holding up a black glove, which the minister recognized as his own. It was found, said the man, this morning on the stage where the people related with Satan's stand. Satan must have dropped it there. I took it. A pure hand doesn't need a glove to cover it, does it? Thank you, my friend, said the minister. His heart was beating fast. It seems to be my glove, but it was lost for a while. The man continued his words, asking something. Minister, did you see the bright light yesterday? There was a big, red, bright letter A in the sky. Did you see it? No, said Minister. I was in my bed. Chapter 7. Hester meets Chillingworth. After that night, at which Hester, the minister, and little Pearl stood on the stage, Hester thought, The minister's face is very white. He is very sick. He is getting weaker and weaker. He is sicker than the old days. He does not know, but his friend is a very bad man. I want to help him. How can I do it? I promised Chillingworth. I cannot tell him that he is my husband. What will I do? Mr. Dimmesdale's nerves and moral force seemed absolutely destroyed. Hester thought that there was an unusual relation between the minister and the old doctor. The patient's health was getting worse day by day because of his doctor, so she should do something in favor of her child's secret father. One day, Hester and Pearl were near the river. Pearl ran down to the margin of the water and started to play with the shells. At that moment, Hester saw Chillingworth and she wanted to talk to him. She told Pearl to play with the shells and seaweed until they finished their conversation. Chillingworth smiled at Hester and started to talk. Hester, you are a very good woman. People say that you are a very helpful woman. A friend of old Governor said very nice things about you. He is a very important man. I think they will take your scarlet letter out. It's none of your business and it does not depend on your pleasure. When the right time comes, that letter will fall away from my chest, replied Hester calmly. She looked at Chillingsworth's face. It was not the face of an intelligent man. 9 years before, he was in love with books. He liked studying nature. Now he had an ugly face. There was a dangerous red light in his eyes. He did not have a warm heart. There was a cold smile on his face. He had analyzed the heart full of torture, and he had transformed into a bad old man full of hate. I do not want to speak about my scarlet letter. I want to speak about the minister, said Hester. I'm ready to listen, said the old doctor. I did not tell anybody about your secret, because I promised you. Now I see you are doing harmful things to Mr. Dimmesdale. You know the secret in his heart, and you are punishing him. He thinks that the devil is doing harmful things in his heart, but it is you. I will not keep my promise to you. No, you cannot do this to me. You cannot tell my name, said Chillingsworth, or I will tell the town Dimmesdale's secret. People will punish him. They will kill him. It will be better than your punishment. You are a devil. Yes, I am a devil. But who made me a devil? I was a good man with my books. I made it. Why do you punish him? You have to punish me. Chillingworth put his finger high and showed the scarlet letter on Hester's chest. This is your punishment. You don't need another one. Hester went back. I will tell Mr. Dimmesdale your secret. I don't know what happens then. Think again, Hester. Hester did not listen to him. You can tell everybody about Dimmesdale and my secret. They will understand us. Maybe they will forgive us, because you are not a good man. The old doctor looked into Hester's eyes. I am very sad for you, Hester, he said. I married you. It was a mistake. I was not a nice husband, he said warmly. I'm sorry, too. You were a happy man with your books. I made you sad. Now you are a devil. I don't want anything for myself. Please forgive Mr. Dimmesdale. Then your heart will be nice again." Hester spoke well, but Chillingworth's cold heart did not listen to her. He shouted at Hester, "Do not speak. I will not listen to you. You made me the devil. Maybe God will forgive you and the minister will, but I will not." There was hate in his eyes. He walked away with an angry face. After he went, Hester thought, "I hate Chillingworth. He did more bad things than I did to him. He is a man without love in his heart." There were tears in Hester's eyes. It had been 7 long years under the torture of the Scarlet Letter. Now she was only looking for a little justice, not for herself, just for the minister. Later she called Pearl. Pearl heard her mother's voice and came near her mother. "Why are you crying, Mother?" she asked. Hester showed her Scarlet Letter to Pearl and asked, "Do you know, Pearl? What is it?" "I know. This is a big letter A." "Why is it on my chest, do you know?" The minister puts his hand on his heart. "And there is a Scarlet Letter on yours." "Why is that? Can you tell me?" "I don't know." Pearl held her mother's hand and talked quietly. "Please, Mother, tell me." Hester looked at Pearl's beautiful face. She is very pretty. Hester thought, how can I tell her that she is the child of a sinful mother? I cannot tell. She smiled warmly at Pearl. "Why are you asking these questions? I don't know what is in the minister's heart, and I wear this Scarlet Letter, because it is nice." Pearl did not like her mother's answer. She asked the same questions again, but Hester did not answer. That night, while Hester was putting her to bed, although Pearl seemed to be fairly asleep, the little girl looked up and with a gleaming in her eyes asked again, "Mother, what does the Scarlet Letter mean?" The next day, when Pearl woke up, she kept asking questions. Why does the minister put his hand on his heart? For the first time, Hester was really angry with Pearl, and she said, "Hold your tongue, naughty child, or I shall shut you up in the dark closet." Chapter 8. A Walk in the Forest. Hester was worried about Arthur Dimmesdale. She wanted to tell the old doctor's secret as soon as possible. She wanted to tell him to know his doctor's real character. But the minister was not in town. "He will be in the town tomorrow," a man said to her at church. The next day, Hester took Pearl and they went to the forest. Pearl was her mother's little companion who was always there with her in all her expeditions. In the forest, Hester waited for Arthur Dimmesdale. Overhead was a gray expanse of cloud. "Mother," said little Pearl, "the sunshine doesn't love you. I'm trying to catch it, but it runs away and hides itself whenever it sees you. I think it's afraid of something on your bosom. If you observe it, will not run away from me, because I wear nothing on my bosom yet." Hester said, "I hope you never wear it, my dear child." And she continued, "Now run away and catch the sunshine. It will soon disappear." A short time later, Hester saw the minister. "Play in the forest, but do not go away. I will talk to the minister," she shouted to Pearl. Arthur Dimmesdale was very unhappy. He was tired. He wasn't smiling. There was no light in his eyes. He was very sick. "Arthur Dimmesdale," Hester said. The minister's eyes looked for Hester. "Hester Prynne, is that you?" He made a step towards her and discovered the Scarlet Letter. Hester walked towards Dimmesdale and she held his hand. They walked together into the forest. Hester's hand was in Dimmesdale's hand. After a while, the minister fixed his eyes on Hester Prynne's. "Are you happy?" asked the minister. "What about you?" Hester asked, too. "No, I am hopeless." "People in town love you very much. You are doing good things in church." "It does not make me happy. People think that I am a wonderful person. They say that I have a good heart, but my heart is as bad as the devil. They do not know that I am sinful. I want to talk to somebody about this, but nobody listens to me. I have no friends." "Don't talk like that. I am your friend. You can talk to me. But now I will say something very important to you. Your friend in your house is as dangerous as the devil." "What are you saying?" "I made a mistake, Arthur. I have a secret. I did not say it because I promised not to tell. I am very sorry. It was wrong to do this," Hester cried. She felt really sorry for Dimmesdale. "I have to tell you this secret. It is about your friend in the house, the old doctor. He says that he is Roger Chillingworth. This is not right. He is Prynne. He is my husband." Dimmesdale did not want to hold Hester's hand. He took his hand away. He was angry with Hester. He looked at her with cold eyes. "Why did you do that to me? I lived with your husband in the same house. He saw my heart. I will not forgive you." Hester held Arthur's arm and put his head on her chest. He wanted to take his head away, but Hester did not let him. "You have to forgive me. People do not like me in town. I can deal with this, but you cannot hate me too. I cannot live with this." Hester held the young minister for a few minutes. Arthur looked into Hester's eyes warmly. Now he was not angry. "I forgive you, Hester," he said. "Maybe we made a mistake, but we are not the worst people. There is somebody worse than us. He is Roger Chillingworth. He is the greatest sinner. His sin is darker than ours. Hester, we did not hurt anybody." "No, we did not," Hester said. "We just loved. This is our sin. But he has no love in his heart." Hester and Arthur sat silently in the forest. They did not talk. They just looked at the river and listened to the sound of the wind. Then Arthur started to talk. "Roger Chillingworth will understand that I know this secret. What will he do? Will he tell the people in the town that I am the other sinner, the father of little Pearl? What do you think?" "I do not know, but I think he will not tell your secret. He will try to hurt you in a different way," said Hester. "I know that he is not a good man. He is the child of the devil. Now what will I do? How will I live with my enemy and breathe the same air with him? Hester, you are stronger than me. Think for me." Arthur was pressing his hand nervously against his heart. "You have to leave the town, Arthur. You have to go away. Then you will be free." "How?" asked Arthur. "You came here from old England. You can get on a ship. It can take you back to your old land." Arthur thought sadly, "How can I go? I am not healthy. I am tired and I feel sick. I'm powerless to go on my own." "You shall not go alone. I'll come with you," said Hester. Arthur felt very hopeful and happy once he made the decision to go. He felt that a burden of guilt was lifted off his shoulders. His heart was full of love. He held Hester and said, "This will be a new start for both of us. I can see that the future is full of success and happiness. We have to enjoy it together with our daughter. How couldn't we think of it before? It's ridiculous to think about the past. We will begin a new and happy life." Then she took the scarlet letter out from her chest and threw it among the trees. Then she put her white cap off. Her long and dark hair shone in the sun. She was as beautiful as in the old days. "You will meet Pearl now," said Hester to Arthur. "You will see her more different than before." "Will she want to meet me?" asked the minister, hesitating. "Do you think she will love me?" "Of course she will love you. You are her father," Hester answered. Then Hester called Pearl. Pearl came out of the trees. She stood on the other side of the river. She was standing in a ray of sunshine. The animals of the forest were not afraid of her, and even a wolf allowed her to pat its head. Pearl had decorated herself with wild flowers, both in her hair and on her clothing. She looked at her mother. The minister observed the child, but this time Pearl seemed more different to him. "She is like a real child now. She has a child's spirit," said the minister. "Come, my little Pearl. The minister is here. He wants to see you. He wants to be your friend. Go across the river." But Pearl did not go across the river. She did not move. She only looked at her mother's dress. "Naughty girl," Hester smiled. "Come to us. We wait for you." There was no answer from Pearl. "Come or I will get angry with you," shouted Hester. Little Pearl sat near the river and started to scream and to cry. She pointed to Hester's chest where the scarlet letter had been removed. Finally Hester understood. She called Pearl. "Look, it's on the ground, in front of your feet." Pearl stopped crying and looked at the ground. It was the scarlet letter. "Take it," said Hester. "Take it and come here." "No," answered Pearl in a cold way. "You come and take it, not me." Hester had to get up and cross the stream, reattach the letter, and put her hair back under her white cap. "The scarlet letter is again on my chest. Is it good?" Hester said sadly. "Now will you come?" "Yes, I will come." Pearl went across the river and stood next to her mother. She held her mother's hand. Tenderly she kissed her mother's brow and both her cheeks. But then she did a strange thing as always, and she kissed the scarlet letter too. "Now you are my mother again, and I am your little daughter. But why is the minister standing there and waiting for us?" asked Pearl. Hester didn't answer, and they walked toward the young minister. "Will you walk with us in town? Will you keep your hand over your heart?" Pearl asked the minister. Hester shouted at her angrily, "Don't ask these kind of questions, you foolish child." Arthur kissed her cheek and said, "Not now, my dear Pearl." Pearl looked at him in an angry way. She seemed to be influenced by the jealousy in her heart, which was for her mother, and thought of the minister as a dangerous rival. So the little girl showed no kindness to him. She ran to the river. In the water, she washed her forehead and her cheek. Chapter 9. The Confession. Arthur Dimmesdale left the forest and went back to town. He had much more energy than when he had left only 2 days earlier, and everything looked different to him. He went to an office and asked, "Are there any ships to England?" The man in the office answered, "Yes, there is a ship to England, but it will go 4 days later." Arthur felt happy, because there was a great ceremony for the next new governor 3 days later. "Everybody will be in church, and I will speak in church. After the ceremony I can get on the ship with Hester and Pearl. We will be very happy," he thought. Then Dimmesdale turned back home. Chillingworth was in his room. He saw Dimmesdale and offered to make some medicine for him so that he would have enough energy to write his election sermon. The election sermon was meant to be the highlight of the minister's career to date, and was an extremely important speech. "You look very tired. I can give you a medicine. Then you will be strong when you speak in church." "I do not want anything from you. I am not sick," he answered. The old doctor was surprised, but he said, "This is very good. I helped you, and now you feel better." "Yes," the minister said. "Thank you very much for your help. I am better with your help. Now I want to stay alone, because I will work. I have to speak in church, and I will write some notes." Chillingworth went. Dimmesdale took some papers from his table and threw them away. "I do not want to write for the ceremony. I want to write true things, different things." Then he sat on his chair and started to write. He wrote, and wrote all night. He did not sleep. He thought and wrote. In the ceremony day, the town square was very crowded. There were a lot of people. Hester and Pearl were also there. The marketplace was teeming with people. There was a holiday to celebrate the election of a new governor. Although it wasn't Sunday, everybody stopped working. "Why did people come here, Mother?" Pearl asked Hester. "Because the new governor will walk through here. Then very important people will walk too. You will listen to a lot of very nice music." "Will the minister be here?" asked Pearl. "Yes, he will come," answered Hester. "Will he hold my hand?" asked Pearl. "No, not today, little Pearl." "The minister is a very strange man. He held my hand on a dark night, he kissed me in the forest, but he doesn't want to know me in the daytime." "Be silent. Do not talk like this. You cannot understand these things. Now watch the people. They are very happy." A group of sailors was also in town, and they were planning to leave the next day. Hester and Dimmesdale had worked a plan to escape on their ship. Hester looked at the people. Suddenly a man stood next to Hester. It was the captain of the ship. His clothes were old and dirty. The sun had burnt his face. He had a brown face. "We have another person in the ship," he said. Hester was surprised. She looked at the man. He smiled. "What do you mean? Who is this person?" "Roger Chillingworth," the man said. "He wanted to go with the minister. He says that he is the minister's best friend. It is very good, because there will be a doctor on my ship." The captain talked to Hester and went away. Hester felt very sick and unhappy. "What will I do now?" she thought. She closed her eyes for a minute. When she opened them, she saw her husband, Roger Chillingworth. He was across the square. He smiled at Hester mysteriously. Hester did not like it. Then Hester heard the music through the noise of the crowd. People shouted happily when the important people of Boston walked through the town square. Pearl felt very excited and happy. She danced. Suddenly, Hester saw Arthur Dimmesdale. The minister did not put his hand on his heart for the first time in 7 years. He was not tired. His face was not white. There was light in his eyes. He appeared to have far more energy than ever before. Arthur Dimmesdale and the other important people of Boston went into church. Hester and Pearl waited outside. They stood near the high stage. People started to get out of church after an hour. "He spoke very well," one of the men said. "Yes, it was great," another man agreed. Dimmesdale had finished his sermon, and the crowd erupted in loud applause. It marked the highest point of Dimmesdale's life. But in a few minutes, Dimmesdale started to lose the energy which had sustained him ever since meeting Hester in the forest. The music started to play again. The important people of Boston started to come out of church. Then Hester saw Arthur Dimmesdale. "Oh no," she said. She could not believe it. Other people looked at the minister. He was very sick. His face was white again. There was no light in his eyes. He walked very slowly. The old minister, John Wilson, was very afraid. He warned Arthur Dimmesdale. "Be careful, Mr. Dimmesdale. You are going to fall." He wanted to help the young minister. He tried to hold Arthur's hand, but Arthur did not want him to. Then he began to walk into the crowd. A few minutes later, he stopped near the high stage. He looked at Hester and little Pearl. Everybody was silent. "What is the minister doing?" somebody asked. "Why is he looking at this woman and her child?" another person wanted to know. Suddenly, Arthur Dimmesdale moved his hand toward Hester. "Come, Hester," he said. "Come here, my dear Pearl." Hester walked slowly, but Pearl went into the minister's arms like a bird and hugged his knees. At that moment, Roger Chillingworth pushed the crowd and wanted to stop Arthur Dimmesdale. "No, do not go there. Are you crazy? Do not stand next to that woman." Arthur turned to Roger Chillingworth and said, "I will not listen to you. You are too late. I am not yours. I will be free from you. I will now escape your evil influence. God will help me." Then he turned his head to Hester. "Hester Prynne, in the name of God, come with me to the stage. Help me. I am very weak." Arthur Dimmesdale put one of his hands on Hester's arm. He held little Pearl's hand with his other hand. They climbed the stairs and stood on the stage. Some of the people got angry with the minister. On the stage, Arthur whispered to Hester, "It is better than our voyage to England, don't you agree?" "Do you think it is better? We will die now, and our dear Pearl will die too. Is it better or not? I do not know." "Hester, I am going to die. I will take our sin with me when I die. Do not worry. God loves little Pearl." Then Arthur Dimmesdale turned to the crowd and talked loudly. "You loved me, but I am not a good man. People of Boston, listen to me. I am a sinner. I did not stand on this stage with Hester and Pearl. This was my greatest mistake." The crowd was bewildered by the actions of the minister. He told them that he should have stood with Hester 7 years earlier. Then Arthur Dimmesdale did a very interesting thing. He opened his shirt in front of the people and indicated that he had secretly worn the badge of the Scarlet Letter the whole time, without anyone knowing it. Everybody was very excited and came nearer to the stage. They wanted to see the young minister. Dimmesdale stood on the stage with his open shirt, but he could not stand and fell down. Hester was next to him. Roger Chillingworth ran and got on stage. He looked at Dimmesdale. "You escaped from me," he said. "You are a sinner too. Your sin is worse than ours. It is darker than our sin. God forgive you." Then he turned his eyes to his little daughter. Pearl was sad. Dimmesdale then sank down to his knees and asked Pearl to kiss him. She kissed her father, and her tears fell upon his cheek. "Don't be unhappy, my lovely Pearl." His voice was tired. Hester kissed Arthur too. "Now you can see heaven. Tell me, what do you see? Will we see each other again or not?" "I do not know, Hester. We are sinners. We made a mistake. God forgive us. We sinned, but God knows we are not bad people." These were minister's last words. After he spoke, he closed his eyes and died. Chapter 10. Hester and Arthur. After Arthur Dimmesdale's death, Hester and Pearl went out of Boston. Roger Chillingworth died a few months later. He left all his money to Pearl. People in town always spoke about the day in the town square when Arthur, Hester, and Pearl stood on stage. They told different stories. "There was a scarlet letter A on the minister's chest. God did it," some of the people said. "It was Roger Chillingworth's work. He put it on the minister's chest," the other people said. Most of the people said, "There was nothing on his chest." Years had passed quickly. One day, in a sunny afternoon, little children were playing near the old house of Hester Prynne. They were running and shouting, but suddenly they became silent, because they saw an old woman. She was Hester. The scarlet letter was still on her chest. She walked through the children and went to her house. Her house was decorated with little ornaments. What about Pearl? She was not with her mother. Hester was in Boston again. But where was Pearl? She did not turn back to Boston with her mother. She was living in another city. She was writing letters to her mother. She was not only happy and mindful of her mother, she had also married an honorable man. And one day, Hester began to prepare some clothes for a baby. Hester lived in her old house for many years after Dimmesdale's death. She did not move her house inside the city. She also did not take her scarlet letter out. She always wore it. She continued to make dresses for poor people. She was an angel. When she was very old, she died in peace. The people in town made her grave near the grave of Arthur Dimmesdale. They could not live with each other, but after death, one tombstone served for both.